Less than 1 second. That is all it may have taken. One brief moment. One sound that nobody on the surface could hear. Then silence. On a calm morning above the North Atlantic Ocean, a small support ship waited for a routine message from a submersible called Titan. The crew had received updates before. Everything appeared normal. The passengers were descending toward one of the most famous shipwrecks in history. The plan was simple: reach the remains of Titanic, explore the site, and return safely. But that message never came. Communication suddenly stopped. No warning, no distress call, no request for help, just silence. At first, nobody knew whether the communication system had simply failed. Deep underwater, radio signals cannot travel through seawater. Titan depended on short text messages and acoustic communication with the surface. Small interruptions had happened before. The crew hoped this was another temporary problem. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The silence continued. Inside the support ship, concern slowly replaced confidence. Thousands of meters below the Atlantic, sunlight could no longer reach. The water was completely black. The pressure outside the submersible had become almost impossible to imagine. Every square inch of the vessel carried an enormous force from the surrounding ocean. If something had gone wrong down there would be almost no way to help. Soon the mission transformed from an exploration into an emergency. Around the world, people began hearing the same question: where is Titan? News channels interrupted regular programming. Experts gathered in television studios. Deep-sea engineers tried to explain what could have happened. Families waited for answers that nobody could provide. Hope remained. Maybe the communication system had failed. Maybe Titan had released emergency weights and was already floating toward the surface. Maybe the passengers were still alive. But another possibility quietly entered every conversation. What if something far worse had happened? The Atlantic Ocean has protected its secrets for centuries. It hid the wreck of Titanic for more than 70 years before anyone found it again. Now, in the exact same waters, another mystery was unfolding. A modern submersible carrying 5 people had disappeared while searching for history. The irony was impossible to ignore. The expedition meant to visit one of history's greatest maritime disasters was becoming a tragedy of its own. As rescue teams prepared to search an area larger than many countries, every passing hour mattered. Every new report created more questions than answers. Every expert offered a different possibility: mechanical failure, power loss, navigation problems, a leak, or something so sudden that nobody inside had time to react. One terrifying theory stood above all the others: an implosion, a collapse so violent and so fast that human senses could never fully register it. If that theory was true, the end would not have lasted minutes. It would not have lasted seconds. It would have happened faster than the human brain could understand. But was that really what happened? Or was the truth even more complicated? To answer that question, we have to go back to the beginning. To understand why Titan existed, why people willingly entered one of the most dangerous environments on Earth, and why so many warning signs were ignored before the mission ever began. Long before Titan disappeared beneath the Atlantic, the mission had already captured the world's imagination. For decades, the wreck of Titanic had remained one of the most difficult places on Earth to reach. Resting nearly 4,000 meters below the surface, it lies in complete darkness, where the pressure is hundreds of times greater than at sea level. Only a handful of specialized expeditions had ever visited it. Then came a new idea. What if private citizens could experience the journey themselves? OceanGate believed that deep-sea exploration should not be limited to governments and large research organizations. The company promised to open one of the world's most exclusive destinations to explorers willing to accept the risk. The Titan submersible became the center of that vision. Unlike traditional deep-diving submersibles built almost entirely from metal, Titan used an unusual combination of materials. Its design aimed to reduce weight while reaching extraordinary depths. Supporters called it innovative. Critics questioned whether such an approach had been tested enough for repeated dives into one of the harshest environments on Earth. Even before the expedition began, opinions were divided. Some engineers praised the company's willingness to challenge old ideas. Others believed that the ocean was the last place where experimentation should replace proven engineering. Despite those concerns, preparations continued. Each passenger understood that the mission involved danger. Before boarding, they signed documents acknowledging serious risks associated with deep-sea exploration. The Atlantic offered no room for mistakes, yet excitement overshadowed fear. For many, this was more than a tourist expedition. It was a chance to witness history with their own eyes. to look upon the legendary wreck that had inspired books, documentaries, and films for generations. On the morning of the dive, conditions appeared favorable. The support ship positioned itself above the dive site. Final equipment checks were completed. Communication systems were tested. The crew carefully reviewed procedures one final time. Inside Titan, the atmosphere was remarkably calm. The passengers knew they were about to enter a world that very few humans had ever seen. As the hatch was sealed from the outside, there was only one way back. The entire mission now depended on the submersible itself. Slowly, Titan began its descent. The waves disappeared above. Sunlight faded into deep blue, then into darkness. Every passing minute carried the sub farther away from the surface, and farther beyond immediate rescue. Above them, the support crew monitored every stage. Everything appeared to be unfolding according to plan. No one could imagine that the journey had already begun to move toward one of the most discussed maritime disasters of the 21st century. Within hours, the world would no longer be asking whether Titan could reach Titanic. It would be asking whether Titan could ever return. Titan continued its slow descent into a world that almost no human has ever seen. With every passing minute, the ocean became colder, darker, heavier. The sunlight disappeared completely, leaving only the glow from the submersible's exterior lights. Outside the small viewing window, there was nothing but endless black water. Down here, there were no landmarks, no horizon, no sound except the quiet hum of Titan's own systems. Inside the vessel, the passengers waited patiently as the depth increased. Every few moments, the crew on the surface received short acoustic messages, confirming the dive was continuing as planned. Unlike airplanes or ships, Titan could not use ordinary radio signals. Seawater blocked them completely. Instead, communication relied on sound traveling through the ocean, making every message slower and far more limited. The deeper Titan traveled, the greater the pressure became. At sea level, the human body experiences 1 atmosphere of pressure. At Titanic's depth, that pressure rises to nearly 400 atmospheres. Every square centimeter of the submersible faced forces strong enough to crush ordinary steel. Only flawless engineering stood between the passengers and the surrounding ocean. This is why deep-sea exploration has always been one of humanity's greatest engineering challenges. The ocean does not forgive mistakes. A tiny crack that might seem insignificant on land could become catastrophic thousands of meters below the surface. Every bolt, every seal, every material, every design decision mattered. As Titan approached the final stage of its descent, the support ship continued tracking its position. Then something unexpected happened. The scheduled communication never arrived. At first, nobody panicked. Small delays had happened on previous dives. Acoustic signals could occasionally be interrupted. The crew waited. A few more minutes passed. Another attempt was made. No response. The support team tried again. Still nothing. The silence was becoming impossible to ignore. Engineers immediately considered several possibilities. Perhaps Titan had suffered a power failure. Perhaps the communication equipment had malfunctioned. Perhaps the submersible had changed direction and temporarily moved beyond reliable contact. Each explanation sounded reasonable. Each offered hope. But none could explain why every attempt to reconnect failed. The atmosphere aboard the support ship changed dramatically. Routine procedures became emergency procedures. Every passing minute reduced the number of possible explanations. Far below, Titan remained invisible. The Atlantic had swallowed it completely. On the surface, no one knew whether the passengers were calmly waiting inside an intact vessel or whether something unimaginable had already happened. Then another terrifying reality became clear. If Titan was trapped on the ocean floor, time itself had become the greatest enemy. The estimated oxygen supply was limited. Every hour that passed brought the passengers closer to a deadline no rescue team wanted to face. What had started as an extraordinary expedition was now becoming an international race against time. The search was about to begin, but the ocean was vast. And somewhere beneath nearly 4 kilometers of water, Titan had vanished without leaving a single visible clue. The moment Titan disappeared, the mission changed forever. What had started as a historic expedition quickly became one of the largest deep-sea search operations in recent memory. The support ship reported the loss of communication. Emergency procedures were activated. Soon, coast guards, naval experts, research vessels, and deep-sea specialists from multiple countries began working together. But they faced an impossible challenge. The search area stretched across thousands of square kilometers. The Atlantic Ocean is unpredictable. Strong currents constantly move beneath the surface. Even if Titan had surfaced safely, Finding a vessel no larger than a small truck in the middle of the open ocean would be incredibly difficult. Then another problem emerged. No one knew where Titan actually was. Its last known position only provided an estimate. It could have continued descending, it could have drifted sideways, it could have reached the ocean floor, or it could have suffered an emergency long before reaching Titanic. Every possibility required a different search strategy. Aircraft scanned the surface, ships searched for signs of debris, specialized sonar equipment began listening for unusual sounds beneath the waves. The world followed every update. News channels broadcast live coverage around the clock. Experts analyzed maps, dive paths, and engineering diagrams. Social media filled with theories. Some people believed Titan had lost power and was waiting silently on the seabed. Others believed the submersible had become trapped inside the wreck of Titanic itself. A few suggested the communication system had simply failed and that the passengers would eventually reappear. Hope remained alive. Then came another report. Search crews detected underwater noises at regular intervals. The discovery immediately sparked worldwide attention. Could the sounds be coming from Titan? Could the passengers be knocking against the hull, hoping someone would hear them? For a brief moment, optimism returned. Rescue teams redirected equipment toward the source of the sounds. Every minute mattered. If survivors were inside, the remaining oxygen was slowly running out. But experts urged caution. The ocean is full of mysterious noises. Ships, marine life, shifting currents. Even distant geological activity can produce sounds that confuse investigators. Without visual confirmation, nobody could say what had created the signals. Still, the possibility was enough to keep the rescue effort moving at full speed. Families waited for news. Millions of people watched the countdown to the estimated oxygen limit. Every hour increased the pressure, not only beneath the ocean, but on everyone searching above it. Then investigators began considering another explanation, one that was far more frightening. What if there were no survivors to rescue? What if the silence had not been caused by a communication failure? What if Titan had experienced something so sudden that the mission had ended before anyone on board even realized what was happening? The answer to that question would lead investigators toward one of the most terrifying forces found anywhere on Earth. A force powerful enough to crush an entire submersible in the blink of an eye. As the search entered another day, hope and fear existed side by side. Every news update carried the same question: how much oxygen remained? Experts estimated that Titan had a limited life support supply if the vessel had remained intact. News organizations around the world displayed countdown timers, reminding millions that every passing hour could be the difference between rescue and tragedy. The pressure on rescue teams was enormous. Ships arrived from different nations. Military aircraft crossed the Atlantic. Oceanographic research vessels changed course to join the mission. Some of the world's most advanced remotely operated vehicles were transported to the search area. These machines were capable of reaching depths that human divers never could. But getting them there was only the beginning. Once deployed, they would have to search an underwater landscape almost as dark as outer space. Visibility was extremely limited. The seabed was uneven and covered with layers of sediment. Strong currents could move small objects far from where an accident had occurred. Finding Titan was like searching for a single object in an endless black wilderness. Despite these obstacles, rescue crews refused to stop. Every possible lead was investigated. Every sonar reading was analyzed. Every unusual sound was examined. Then another challenge emerged. Even if Titan were located on the ocean floor with survivors still inside, reaching it would be incredibly difficult. No rescue vehicle was waiting nearby. Equipment capable of operating at nearly 4,000 meters below the surface had to be transported across great distances. Time continued to disappear. The estimated oxygen window became smaller with every passing hour. Around the world, experts debated what had most likely happened. One group believed Titan had suffered an electrical failure and was sitting powerless on the seabed. Another suggested the vessel might have dropped its ballast and floated toward the surface, where rough seas made it almost impossible to spot. Others feared a structural failure, a possibility that no one wanted to accept without evidence. The uncertainty became almost unbearable. Families searched for hope in every headline. Viewers watched live broadcasts throughout the night. Even experienced deep-sea engineers admitted they had never witnessed a rescue operation quite like this. Then, as rescue teams prepared for another day of searching, investigators received information that changed the direction of the entire mission. The search was no longer focused only on finding survivors, it was beginning to focus on finding answers. Somewhere near the wreck of Titanic, deep beneath the Atlantic, small pieces of debris had been detected. At first, no one knew what they belonged to. But if those fragments came from Titan, the countdown that had gripped the world might already be over. The rescue mission was about to become an investigation. And the evidence waiting on the ocean floor would reveal a truth more devastating than anyone had imagined. Hours after remotely operated vehicles reached the ocean floor, investigators finally saw something they had hoped never to find: small pieces of debris, scattered across the seabed. At first, the images raised more questions than answers. The fragments were lying not far from the wreck of Titanic. Some appeared to belong to an underwater vehicle, others were difficult to identify. Then came the confirmation. The debris matched major components of Titan. The search for survivors was over. The mission had become a recovery operation. The announcement shocked the world. For days, millions had followed every update, hoping the passengers were still alive somewhere beneath the Atlantic. Instead, investigators concluded that Titan had suffered a catastrophic implosion. But what does that actually mean? An implosion is the opposite of an explosion. Instead of pressure forcing outward, unimaginable pressure crushes inward. At Titanic's depth, the ocean presses against every surface with incredible force. Each square inch of the hull must resist thousands of pounds of pressure. If even one critical part of that protective shell suddenly fails, the surrounding water rushes inward with overwhelming speed. The collapse happens almost instantly, faster than a human can consciously react. There is no time to escape, no time to send a distress call, no time to understand what is happening. This explained one of the greatest mysteries of the disappearance. Why had there been no emergency message? Why had communication ended without warning? According to investigators, the submersible likely lost structural integrity in a fraction of a second. The communication system disappeared at the exact moment the vessel itself ceased to exist. For many engineers, the evidence fit the timeline. Communication stopped suddenly. No emergency beacon activated. No further movement was recorded. The debris field was compact, suggesting the vehicle had not drifted across the seabed after the event. Yet one question remained. Why did the hull fail? Deep-sea submersibles are designed for extreme pressure. Every mission is planned around surviving exactly these conditions. So what made this dive different? Was it a hidden weakness in the materials? Years of repeated pressure cycles slowly weakening the structure? A manufacturing flaw that nobody detected? Or something that happened during the descent itself? Investigators knew the debris could explain how Titan ended, but understanding why it ended would prove far more difficult. Because long before the final dive began, some experts had already expressed concerns. Warnings had been made. Questions had been asked. And according to critics, those warnings may have predicted the very disaster the world had just witnessed. The next stage of the investigation would reveal whether those concerns had been justified, or whether the Atlantic had once again kept part of its secret hidden forever. As investigators examined every recovered fragment, another story began to emerge. It was a story that had started years before Titan's final dive. Long before the world knew the submersible's name, some engineers had questioned its design. Their concerns were not about the destination. They were about the journey. Deep-sea exploration has always followed one simple rule. When operating under crushing pressure, certainty matters more than innovation. Many successful submersibles had relied on proven materials and conservative engineering for decades. Titan chose a different path. Its pressure hull combined materials in a way that was uncommon for repeated dives to such extreme depths. Supporters argued that new technology could make deep-sea exploration more efficient. Critics argued that the ocean was the worst possible place to test unproven ideas. The debate remained mostly within engineering circles. Few people outside the industry paid attention. Then reports surfaced that some experts had previously warned about potential risks. Former employees, industry specialists, experienced engineers. Some questioned whether enough independent testing had been completed. Others believed additional certification would have increased confidence in the vehicle's long-term safety. Those discussions became far more significant after the accident. Investigators began reviewing company documents, maintenance records, engineering data, previous dive reports. Every decision leading up to the final expedition was examined. Could repeated dives have weakened the structure over time? Materials behave differently after experiencing enormous pressure again and again. Tiny imperfections can slowly grow. damage invisible to the human eye, may become dangerous after hundreds of pressure cycles. Investigators wanted to know whether any warning signs had appeared before the disaster. Another question involved monitoring systems. Titan reportedly used sensors designed to detect changes within the structure during dives. Supporters believed this technology could provide early warning if something began to fail. Critics argued that once structural failure starts at extreme depth, there may be no practical time left to react. That disagreement became one of the central questions of the investigation. Could any warning system have prevented the disaster, or was the collapse always too sudden to stop? Meanwhile, public attention focused on another issue: risk. Every passenger knew the expedition involved danger. Deep-sea exploration has never been completely safe. Even the most carefully designed missions operate in one of the harshest environments on Earth. But where is the line between acceptable risk and preventable danger? That question extended far beyond Titan. It challenged the future of private deep-sea exploration itself. Governments, engineers, researchers, and regulatory organizations all began asking whether existing safety standards were enough. The answers would not come quickly, because proving exactly why Titan failed required evidence from thousands of meters beneath the ocean, and every recovered fragment carried only part of the story. The final truth would depend on whether investigators could piece together those fragments into a complete picture. But even then, one mystery still remained. Could this tragedy have been prevented before Titan ever left the surface? Months after the tragedy, the investigation continued far from the public eye. Recovered debris was carefully transported to secure facilities. Every fragment was photographed, measured, examined under powerful microscopes. Investigators were not searching for a single dramatic clue. They were searching for hundreds of tiny details that, together, could explain the disaster. The pressure hull became the center of attention. Experts studied broken edges, damaged components, and connection points, looking for signs of how the failure had begun. Did one section fail first? Did several parts break almost simultaneously? Or had the structure been weakening over time without anyone realizing it? Answering those questions would require months of analysis. Investigators also reviewed thousands of pages of engineering documents, computer models, test results, maintenance records, previous dive data. Every decision made during Titan's development was placed under intense scrutiny. The goal was not only to understand what happened, it was to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again. At the same time, specialists reconstructed Titan's final journey. Using communication logs, support ship records, navigation data, and the location of the debris field, they built a timeline of the last dive, minute by minute, message by message, until the exact moment contact was lost. The timeline revealed something chilling. There was no gradual emergency, no long series of warning messages, no evidence of a desperate attempt to return to the surface. Everything appeared normal. Then, without warning, nothing. That sudden silence supported the theory of a catastrophic structural failure. Still, investigators avoided making assumptions beyond the available evidence. Every conclusion had to be supported by facts. The ocean can destroy evidence as quickly as it hides it. After spending days beneath crushing pressure, currents and sediment can alter the scene in ways that complicate any investigation. Some questions may never be answered with complete certainty. Even so, the investigation was already changing the future of deep-sea exploration. Companies reviewed their safety procedures. Researchers discussed stronger testing standards. Engineers revisited long-held design principles that had been challenged in recent years. Titan's story was becoming more than the story of one expedition. It was becoming a lesson for an entire industry. But for many people, one question still lingered above all others. If the warning signs existed, if concerns had been raised, could this disaster have been avoided? Or was the risk of exploring one of Earth's most hostile environments always greater than anyone truly understood? The official investigation continued searching for answers. Yet beyond the engineering reports and technical findings, the Atlantic still held mysteries that no report could fully explain. Because not every question ends with a final answer. By the time investigators had assembled the available evidence, the basic outline of the tragedy had become clearer. Yet the complete picture remained just out of reach. The debris field, the communication records, the engineering analysis. Together they explained much of what had happened, but not everything. Some details may never be known with absolute certainty, because no recording exists from inside Titan during its final moments. There was no voice recorder, no video showing the exact instant communication stopped. The Atlantic kept that final second to itself. That silence created space for endless theories. Some claimed an unexpected collision caused the disaster. Others suggested Titan became trapped on the seabed before failing. A few even imagined hidden explosions or mysterious forces beneath the ocean. Investigators found no credible evidence supporting those ideas. Instead, the available evidence pointed toward a sudden structural failure under extreme pressure. Even so, science is careful. Responsible investigators rarely claim certainty where certainty does not exist. They explain what the evidence supports. They separate facts from speculation. That distinction matters because tragedies often become surrounded by myths. The deeper the mystery, the easier it becomes for rumors to replace evidence. Titan was no exception. Online discussions produced hundreds of theories. Some sounded convincing. Many ignored basic engineering. Others misunderstood how extreme pressure behaves thousands of meters below the ocean's surface. The Atlantic is already mysterious enough. It does not need invented stories to remain fascinating. Perhaps the greatest lesson from Titan is not about fear. It is about respect. Human technology has reached the moon. Robotic spacecraft have explored distant planets. Satellites circle Earth every day. Yet the deep ocean remains one of the least explored places on our own world. It is silent, cold, relentless. Every expedition enters an environment where nature always holds the advantage. Titan reminded the world that exploration has always carried risk. From the first sailors crossing unknown seas, to astronauts leaving Earth's atmosphere, to researchers descending into the darkest parts of the ocean, progress has often come with extraordinary courage, sometimes with heartbreaking consequences. Still, one final mystery remains, not about how Titan disappeared, but about what humanity will do next. Will this tragedy discourage future explorers? Or will it inspire safer technology that allows future generations to continue exploring the ocean's greatest secrets? The answer has not yet been written because the story of the deep sea is far from over. And somewhere beneath the endless darkness, countless mysteries are still waiting to be discovered. The story of Titan did not end when the search vessels returned to shore. In many ways, that was only the beginning. The tragedy forced governments, engineers, researchers, and private companies to rethink how humanity explores the deepest parts of the ocean. New questions replaced old ambitions. How should deep-sea tourism be regulated? How much testing is enough before carrying passengers into one of Earth's most hostile environments? Can innovation move forward without compromising safety? These questions will shape future expeditions for years to come. The ocean itself remains unchanged. Nearly 4,000 meters below the surface, the wreck of Titanic still rests in complete darkness. The currents continue to flow. The silence remains unbroken. And scattered nearby lies the final resting place of Titan. Two tragedies, separated by more than a century, connected by the same unforgiving ocean. For thousands of years, people have looked toward the sea with equal measures of curiosity and fear. It has carried civilizations across the globe. It has revealed incredible discoveries. But it has also reminded humanity that nature does not negotiate. The deeper we travel, the greater the responsibility we carry. Titan's final mission was meant to bring people closer to history. Instead, it became history itself. The investigation continues to provide valuable lessons. Engineers will build stronger systems. Researchers will develop safer technologies. Future explorers will benefit from knowledge gained through painful experience. That is how exploration has always evolved. Not by ignoring failure, but by learning from it. Yet one truth remains impossible to escape. Despite satellites mapping our planet, despite powerful computers, despite machines capable of surviving unimaginable pressure, much of the deep ocean is still unknown. Scientists estimate that vast areas of the seafloor remain unexplored. Entire ecosystems may still be waiting in darkness. Ancient geological formations remain hidden beneath layers of sediment. Mysteries continue to exist far below the reach of sunlight. Perhaps that is why stories like Titan capture the world's attention. They remind us that even in the modern age, there are still places where certainty disappears. Places where human knowledge reaches its limits. Places where one small mistake can become irreversible. And maybe the greatest mystery is not what happened to Titan. The evidence has answered much of that question. The greater mystery is what still lies beyond the edge of our understanding. How many secrets remain buried beneath the Atlantic? How many discoveries are waiting in oceans we have barely explored? And when the next generation of explorers descends into the darkness, what will they find that we have never imagined? The ocean is silent. It offers no explanations, only questions. And perhaps that is why its greatest mysteries never truly end.